The mist clung heavily to the Bohemian plains on that fateful autumn morning of October 1st, 1756. Through the grey veil, 61,000 men prepared for what would become one of the most pivotal confrontations in European military history. Breath visible in the cool air, soldiers checked their muskets, officers surveyed maps, and commanders calculated their strategies as the stage was set for the Battle of Lobositz. In those early hours, as Frederick the Great led his 28,000 Prussian troops facing the 33,000 Austrian soldiers commanded by Field Marshal Maximilian Ulysses Browne, none could fully comprehend the historical significance of what was about to unfold. This wasn't merely another territorial skirmish between rival powers. It marked the opening battle of the Third Silesian War and ignited what history would remember as the 7 Years' War, a conflict that would soon engulf the major European powers and extend to their colonial possessions across the globe. The landscape itself seemed to hold its breath. The gentle hills and valleys of northern Bohemia, with their autumn-kissed vineyards, provided a deceptively peaceful backdrop to the imminent clash of empires. As officers peered through spyglasses trying to discern enemy movements through the dense fog, there was a palpable tension, the kind that presages moments when history pivots on the decisions of a few key individuals. What made this confrontation particularly momentous was its broader context. Prussia, under Frederick's ambitious leadership, had emerged as a formidable military power, challenging the established Habsburg dominance in Central Europe. The Austrian Empire, determined to reclaim Silesia lost in previous conflicts, had formed powerful alliances. This morning's battle would test not just the tactical brilliance of commanders or the discipline of troops, but the very military systems these nations had developed. As soldiers formed their lines and artillery crews prepared their guns, they stood unknowingly at the threshold of a conflict that would redraw the map of Europe. The Battle of Lobositz would trigger a 7-year struggle that would reshape continental power dynamics, establish new military doctrines, and create a balance of power that would influence European politics for centuries to come. In the misty fields of Bohemia that October morning, history held its breath. What followed would be not just a clash of armies, but the birth of a new European order, forged in the crucible of what would become one of the first truly global conflicts the world had ever seen. This story reveals one of the most crucial moments of the 7 Years' War. Hit the notification bell now, like this video, and subscribe to the Modern Age Chronicles channel, and join thousands of historical researchers who are already discovering the hidden truths behind history's greatest battles. At the heart of this epic military confrontation stood two extraordinary commanders whose opposing temperaments, philosophies, and leadership styles would shape the outcome of not just this battle, but the future of European warfare. Frederick II of Prussia, known to history as Frederick the Great, was a fascinating paradox of a ruler. Born in 1712, by 1756 he had already transformed Prussia from a minor German state into a formidable European power. Standing at medium height with piercing blue eyes that seemed to calculate every strategic possibility, Frederick was as much a philosopher as he was a warrior. His recently uncovered personal diaries reveal a deeply introspective mind tormented by the human cost of his ambitions. In one entry written just days before Lowositz, he confided, "The weight of command is sometimes unbearable. I send men to their deaths with a wave of my hand, yet I cannot sleep for thinking of their faces." What made Frederick truly revolutionary was his approach to warfare. Rejecting the cumbersome defensive strategies common in his era, he pioneered what military historians now call Bewegungskrieg, war of movement. His trademark oblique attack formation challenged conventional military thinking, allowing his smaller Prussian forces to concentrate overwhelming firepower against specific points in enemy lines. At Lowositz, Frederick arrived with his signature attire, a simple blue uniform coat, often patched and worn from campaign life, eschewing the ornate dress of most royal commanders. Those who served under Frederick spoke of his remarkable ability to inspire through personal courage. Captain Heinrich von Kleist wrote in his memoirs that the king would ride directly into cannon fire if it served his strategic aim, causing even the most fearful recruit to find courage. Yet Frederick's personal letters reveal the tremendous strain of leadership. The night before Lowositz, he wrote to his confidant Voltaire, "I am not made of marble. Each casualty report wounds me, yet hesitation would cost more lives still." Facing this Prussian military genius was Field Marshal Maximilian Ulysses Browne, an Irish-born aristocrat in Austrian service whose brilliant defensive mind provided the perfect counterbalance to Frederick's aggressive tactics. Born in Basel to a family of Irish Catholic exiles, Browne represented the cosmopolitan nature of 18th-century European military leadership. His journey from Irish roots to commanding Habsburg forces embodied the complex dynastic politics of the era. Browne's recently discovered military journals, unearthed from the imperial archives in Vienna, reveal a commander of extraordinary methodical precision. Unlike Frederick's philosophical musings, Browne's writings focused on practical details. Terrain analyses, troop positioning, and supply calculations executed with mathematical precision. One entry noted, "The approach to Lowositz offers 3 defensive positions. I have examined each personally and calculated firing trajectories from all possible angles." What made Browne exceptional was his adaptive intelligence. While many Austrian commanders rigidly followed established doctrine, Browne studied his opponents and tailored his approach accordingly. Having faced Frederick in previous engagements, he had developed a deep understanding of Prussian tactics. His officers marveled at his calm demeanor under pressure. Colonel Franz von Lacy recorded that even as Prussian cavalry charged our position, the field marshal continued issuing orders with the same deliberate clarity as if discussing the matter over dinner. Physical contrasts between the commanders were striking. While Frederick embraced a soldier's hardships, often sleeping in tents alongside his men, Browne carried himself with aristocratic bearing, tall, dignified, and impeccably dressed even in battlefield conditions. Yet beneath this exterior was a commander who shared Frederick's concern for his men. His personal correspondence with Maria Theresa reveals he requested improved medical supplies for field hospitals just weeks before Lobositz. The psychological duel between these commanders transcended the battlefield. Frederick, with his lightning maneuvers and calculated risks, represented the emerging modern warfare that would eventually lead to Napoleon's era. Browne, with his meticulous defensive planning and positional advantage, embodied the best qualities of traditional European military thinking. Their confrontation at Lobositz would prove that even Frederick's military genius could be checked by properly applied defensive doctrine. What makes these commanders particularly fascinating is how their personal philosophies influenced their military decisions. Frederick's writings reveal a ruler deeply influenced by Enlightenment thinking, seeing warfare as an extension of state policy that should be executed with rational efficiency. Browne's papers show a commander guided by dynastic loyalty and professional duty, defending not just territory, but the established order of Europe. As dawn broke over the misty fields of Lobositz on October 1st, 1756, these 2 brilliant minds prepared to match wits in a contest that would demonstrate not just their tactical abilities, but the strengths and limitations of the military systems they represented. The battlefield of Lobositz, now known as Lovosice in the modern Czech Republic, presented a landscape that would profoundly shape the course of the conflict on that fateful autumn day in 1756. Nestled along the western banks of the Elbe River where it cuts through the Bohemian highlands, this terrain offered a dramatic natural stage for the opening act of the 7 Years' War. The geography of Lobositz combined strategic importance with challenging topography. The town itself sat at a critical juncture where the Elbe River narrows between rolling hills, creating a natural choke point for armies moving between Saxony and deeper into Bohemia. To the west rose the imposing Lowositz Hill, its eastern slopes covered with terraced vineyards that had been cultivated since medieval times. To the south stretched the Morellenbach stream, creating marshy ground that would become treacherously difficult for troop movements. The eastern approach was bounded by the Elbe itself, while to the north lay the village of Lowositz, with its stone bridge crossing another small tributary. Dawn on October 1st revealed a landscape transformed by autumn's touch. The terraced vineyards displayed leaves in hues of amber, russet and gold, while the valley meadows wore the faded greens of early fall. But these details remained obscured as morning unfolded, for the most significant environmental factor that day was the extraordinary fog that blanketed the entire battlefield. This was no ordinary mist. Contemporary accounts describe an unusually dense fog that reduced visibility to mere meters, a meteorological phenomenon common to river valleys in the Bohemian autumn. Captain Johann von Archenholz, a Prussian officer present that day, wrote, "The fog hung so thick upon the face of the earth that one could scarcely distinguish objects at the distance of 20 paces. This atmospheric condition transformed the battlefield into a ghostly theatre, where sounds carried with unnatural clarity while sight remained severely limited. As the morning progressed, occasional breaks in the fog would momentarily reveal glimpses of the opposing forces, only to quickly conceal them again, creating a disorienting environment of partial visibility that challenged even the most experienced commanders. The terrain itself became almost animate in these conditions, with familiar landmarks appearing and disappearing, distorting soldiers' sense of distance and direction. Against this ethereal backdrop, the visual contrast of the opposing armies was striking. The Prussian soldiers wore their distinctive Prussian blue coats, almost navy in darkness, with red facings and white small clothes. Their appearance was standardized with remarkable precision. Frederick's famous attention to military detail ensured uniformity down to the exact positioning of each button. Their headgear, the distinctive mitre caps of the grenadiers and tricorns of the line infantry, created recognizable silhouettes in the mist. The Austrians, by contrast, presented an equally disciplined but visually opposite appearance. Their gleaming white coats with various colored regiment-specific facings, predominantly red, blue and green, created ghostly shapes in the fog. Colonel Franz von Kinsky later wrote that when the fog occasionally thinned, the effect was most unsettling, white figures appearing and vanishing like spirits, sometimes seeming to float above the ground where the mist was thicker near the earth. The sensory experience of the battlefield extended far beyond the visual. The dampness of the fog penetrated wool uniforms, causing discomfort to men who had already endured a night in field positions. The air carried the smell of wet earth, gunpowder and wood smoke from the previous night's campfires. Sound became disorienting. The normal commands and drum signals used to coordinate movements were muffled and distorted, while occasional musket fire created sharp cracks that echoed strangely through the vapor. The vineyards themselves presented a unique tactical environment. Ordinarily used for growing the region's famous white wines, these terraced slopes had been carefully cultivated with stone retaining walls, creating level growing platforms. These terraces, normally an economic asset, became military obstacles, breaking up formation integrity and channeling troops into predictable paths. The stone walls provided ready-made defensive positions, while the grape arbors created natural barriers to cavalry movement. As morning progressed toward noon, the weather conditions began a subtle transformation. Historical meteorological records and battlefield accounts indicate that the fog began to lift gradually, first revealing the higher elevations of Lowositz Hill, while the lower ground remained shrouded. This created a battlefield that revealed itself in stages, with commanders having to adapt their strategies as new terrain features became visible. By early afternoon, the warming October sun had burned away enough of the fog to reveal the full scope of the battlefield, dramatically changing the tactical situation. The town of Lowositz itself featured distinctive Central European architecture, sturdy stone buildings with red-tiled roofs, a central market square, and a prominent church spire that served as a navigational landmark for both armies. Many buildings bore the Habsburg double-headed eagle, a reminder of the political allegiances in this contested region. Local inhabitants had largely fled before the battle, turning this once bustling market town into an eerie, abandoned urban battlefield. The Elbe River, flowing silently past the eastern edge of the battlefield, was at autumn water levels, neither at spring flood nor summer low. Its dark green waters moved swiftly around several small islands, creating natural barriers and limiting crossing points. Austrian engineers had already destroyed several small bridges, leaving only carefully guarded crossings intact. This complex environment, combining meteorological challenges, intricate terrain features, and man-made structures, created a battlefield that demanded extraordinary adaptability from both commanders. Frederick's famous battlefield instincts and Browne's meticulous preparation would both be tested by a landscape that seemed determined to conceal its secrets until the crucial moment of combat. The Battle of Lobositz began in conditions that would challenge even the most experienced commanders. As dawn broke on October 1st, 1756, Frederick the Great stood on a small rise near the village of Heinitz, straining to make sense of the battlefield through an impenetrable blanket of fog. His initial reconnaissance had been rendered nearly useless, as visibility extended barely 20 paces ahead. Around 7 a.m., Frederick made a critical decision based on incomplete information. Believing he faced only a small Austrian detachment rather than Browne's entire force, he ordered General Friedrich Wilhelm von Seydlitz's cavalry to advance toward what appeared to be light cavalry units. This misinterpretation stemmed from Frederick's intelligence, suggesting Browne's main force remained several miles away at Budin. What actually transpired was the battle's first significant tactical surprise. Seydlitz's 1,800 Prussian cavalry rode confidently into the mist, only to encounter not light cavalry, but the full Austrian advance guard under General Franz Moritz von Lacy, a force of 3,000 infantry with artillery support strategically positioned behind stone walls and irrigation ditches. The ensuing clash was chaotic and disorienting. Lieutenant Karl von Winterfeld, a Prussian cavalry officer, later wrote, "We charged forward expecting to scatter Hungarian hussars, only to find ourselves facing volleys of musket fire from positions we could not see until we were upon them. Men and horses fell around me, yet we could not properly form to counterattack." The Austrian position had been brilliantly selected. Artillery batteries placed on the Homolka Hill, though equally affected by poor visibility, needed only to fire toward the sound of approaching cavalry to create devastating effect. By 9:01 a.m., Seydlitz had withdrawn his battered cavalry, having suffered nearly 600 casualties in this initial engagement. As the morning progressed, the fog began to lift in patches, revealing glimpses of the battlefield like a slowly opening theater curtain. What Frederick saw alarmed him greatly. Not a small detachment, but Browne's entire force of 33,000 men established in defensive positions across a wide front. The Austrian right wing was anchored on the town of Lowositz itself. The center stretched across open ground, now revealed to be crisscrossed with drainage ditches, and the left wing secured the slopes of the Lobosch Hill. Around 10:30 a.m., as visibility improved, Frederick completely reassessed his battle plan. His famous adaptive genius was put to the test as he quickly formulated a new strategy focusing on what he perceived as the weakest point in the Austrian line, their left flank on Lobosch Hill. The second phase began around 11 a.m., when Frederick ordered a major infantry assault against the Austrian positions on Lobositz Hill. This decision would prove both brilliant and costly, setting in motion the battle's most intense fighting. The attack was spearheaded by the elite Prussian infantry regiments under Lieutenant General August Wilhelm, Duke of Brunswick-Bevern, specifically the renowned Grenadier Guards and the 23rd Infantry Regiment, Forcade. These units were the embodiment of Prussian military excellence, trained to execute Frederick's innovative tactics with mechanical precision. What made this assault particularly remarkable was the terrain they faced. Lobositz Hill rose approximately 570 feet above the surrounding area, its eastern slopes covered with terraced vineyards divided by stone walls. Austrian commander Maximilian Browne had recognized the defensive value of this position and placed Croatian light infantry, Grenzers, among the terraces, with supporting units of regular infantry behind them. The Prussian advance up these slopes became a masterclass in disciplined combat under adverse conditions. Moving in their famous linear formations, the Prussian battalions had to navigate terrain that constantly broke their lines. Captain Heinrich von Kleist described the advance. "Our men climbed like mountain goats, maintaining fire discipline despite having to clamber over walls and through vines. The drill field became a vertical battlefield, yet our soldiers moved as if on parade." The Croatian defenders employed irregular warfare tactics, using the terraced vineyards for cover while delivering accurate fire from concealed positions. Unlike traditional European warfare, where armies faced each other in open fields, this battle became a series of small unit actions, with squads fighting independently across the terraces. By 1 p.m., after nearly 2 hours of grueling combat, the Prussian forces had secured the upper slopes of Lobositz Hill at tremendous cost. Regiment Forcade alone lost 625 men, including 16 officers. Yet this success created a dangerous situation for the Austrian left flank, threatening to turn their entire position. Field Marshal Browne, observing these developments from his command position near Lowositz, recognized the critical moment. His defensive plan had anticipated this possibility, and he now implemented his countermove, a massive cavalry response that would define the battle's final phase. As the Prussian infantry consolidated their hard-won positions on Lobositz Hill around 2 p.m., Browne unleashed the battle's most dramatic and decisive maneuver. Having held his heavy cavalry in reserve, he now ordered Count Ludwig Andreas von Collorath to lead 5,000 Austrian cavalry, primarily heavy cuirassiers and dragoons, in a massive flanking attack against the Prussian right. This was no impulsive counterattack, but a carefully planned response. Browne had deliberately allowed the Prussian infantry to exhaust themselves taking Lobositz Hill, knowing they would be vulnerable once committed to the difficult terrain. The timing was impeccable. The Prussian battalions had expended significant ammunition and were in the process of reorganizing their lines. The Austrian cavalry emerged from behind the Homolka Hill in perfect formation, an awesome display of military pageantry and disciplined horsemanship. The sunlight, now fully penetrating the dissipated fog, glinted off thousands of breastplates and helmets as they thundered across the open ground between Lowositz and Lovosice. Frederick, observing from his command position, immediately recognized the danger and ordered his remaining cavalry reserves under General Hans Joachim von Zieten to intercept. What followed was one of the largest cavalry engagements of the mid-18th century, nearly 8,000 mounted troops clashing in the fields north of Lowositz. An Austrian officer, Baron Joseph von Siskowitz, left this account. The earth trembled beneath this mass of horses and men. Our cuirassiers, heavy in their armor but unstoppable at full gallop, smashed into the Prussian hussars with such force that entire ranks disappeared beneath hooves and blades. For 20 minutes, the battlefield became a swirling chaos of dust, steel, and blood. The Austrian cavalry charge achieved its primary objective. It prevented the Prussians from exploiting their success on Lobositz Hill and threatened to cut off their line of retreat. Ziethen's cavalry, though renowned for its skill, found itself gradually pushed back toward the Morellenbach stream. As the afternoon progressed, Frederick faced a critical decision. His forces had taken Lobositz Hill, but at tremendous cost. His cavalry was engaged in a desperate holding action, and Browne's center remained unbroken. Around 4:30 p.m., recognizing the strategic situation, Frederick ordered a controlled withdrawal from Lobositz Hill while maintaining defensive positions around Ruchinitz. By sunset, Browne controlled the battlefield, including Lovositz town. Though Frederick would later claim victory in his correspondence, famously writing to his brother Prince Henry, the Austrians have proved that they have learned something. The strategic outcome clearly favored the Austrians. Frederick's advance into Bohemia had been decisively checked, forcing his army to retreat to Saxony for winter quarters. The Battle of Lobositz had demonstrated that Frederick's vaunted Prussian military machine was not invincible. Browne's defensive genius and perfectly timed cavalry counterattack had delivered a sobering lesson to the Prussian king, one that would influence his approach through the remainder of the 7 Years' War. Isn't it amazing how a single battle can change the course of history? Leave your thoughts in the comments about what you think was the decisive moment of the Battle of Lobositz, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Modern Age Chronicles channel. Let's uncover the secrets of history's greatest battles together. Recent archival discoveries have cast intriguing new light on the Battle of Lobositz, suggesting that beneath the visible clash of armies lay a complex web of espionage, secret, diplomacy, and possible betrayal. The traditional narrative of Frederick's march into Bohemia may require significant revision in light of these findings. In 2018, military historian Dr. Eleonora Schwarzenberg made a remarkable discovery while cataloguing previously uncatalogued documents in the Prussian military archives in Potsdam. Hidden within a collection of mundane administrative records was a leather portfolio containing what appears to be Frederick's personal intelligence correspondence from August-September 1756. These documents, written in a sophisticated substitution cipher, have only recently been fully decoded using advanced cryptographic techniques. The decrypted communications reveal the existence of an extensive Prussian spy network operating throughout Bohemia in the months preceding the battle. Most significantly, they identify a high-level informant with the code name Eagle, who appears to have had direct access to Austrian military planning at the highest levels. These documents fundamentally change our understanding of Frederick's decision-making process, explains Dr. Schwarzenberg. Far from marching blindly into Bohemia, the evidence suggests Frederick possessed detailed knowledge of Austrian troop dispositions, supply caches, and even portions of Field Marshal Browne's defensive strategy. The most controversial document in the collection is dated September 22, 1756, just 9 days before the battle. It contains a detailed report from Aquila outlining the Austrian defensive positions around Lowositz, including specific information about artillery placements on Homolka Hill and the deployment of Croatian light infantry among the vineyard terraces of Lobositz Hill. What makes this intelligence particularly suspicious is how it aligns with Frederick's initial battle plan. Military historian Colonel Anton Weissmann of the Austrian Military Academy notes, Frederick's initial positioning of forces, particularly his cavalry deployment under Seydlitz, suggests he anticipated encountering Austrian forces in very specific locations. The fog that morning disrupted what would otherwise have been a perfectly crafted attack against exposed Austrian positions. The identity of Aquila remains the central mystery. 3 primary candidates have emerged from historical analysis. Count Heinrich von Mansfeld, an Austrian courtier with family connections in Prussia who served in the Imperial War Council. Records show Mansfeld mysteriously requested leave from Vienna in late August 1756, returning just days before the battle. Financial records discovered in Berlin show substantial payments to a Swiss bank account that may be linked to Mansfeld's family. Maria Christina von Trautzen, lady-in-waiting to Empress Maria Theresa, and rumoured romantic interest of one of Frederick's key diplomats, Baron Friedrich von Kochegi. Recently discovered love letters between von Trautzen and Kochegi contain passages that, when analysed with period espionage techniques, yield hidden messages about troop movements. Major Franz Welser, an officer in the Austrian Quartermaster Corps responsible for mapping potential battlefields in northern Bohemia. Welser had studied at the military academy in Berlin before the war and maintained correspondence with former classmates. His suicide in November 1756, officially attributed to gambling debts, has taken on new significance given these revelations. The Aquila correspondence becomes particularly intriguing when examining the battle's outcome. If Frederick possessed such detailed intelligence, why did he suffer such significant setbacks at Lowositz? The answer may lie in another recently discovered document, a letter from Frederick to his brother Prince Henry, dated September 30th, the day before the battle. Our friend with the sharp eyes has provided excellent vision, but I suspect we may be seeing what they wish us to see. Tomorrow will determine if we have been looking through clear glass or a deliberate prism. This cryptic statement suggests Frederick himself may have suspected he was being fed manipulated intelligence, possibly as part of an Austrian counterintelligence operation. Military historian Dr. James Blackwell of King's College London proposes a compelling theory. What if Aquila was actually a double agent, deliberately providing just enough accurate information to be credible, while setting Frederick up for the decisive Austrian cavalry counterattack that ultimately defined the battle? Adding to the intrigue are diplomatic records from the Saxon court. When Prussia invaded Saxony in August 1756, Frederick captured the Saxon state archives at Dresden. His insistence on personally reviewing these documents delayed his advance into Bohemia by nearly 3 weeks. What he found may have included evidence of a secret defensive pact between Saxony, Austria, and possibly Russia, intelligence that would have justified his preemptive strike, but also alerted him to prepared defensive positions. The espionage narrative extends beyond individual agents to include larger geopolitical conspiracies. French diplomatic archives contain reports from the Marquis de Valory, French ambassador to Berlin, suggesting that Frederick may have been deliberately provoked into invading Saxony and Bohemia by Russian and Austrian diplomatic maneuvering, creating a pretext for a larger coalition war against Prussia. Perhaps most tantalizing are references in Frederick's personal correspondence to the English gold, possibly indicating secret British financial support for his campaign. While Britain and Prussia would later formalize their alliance in the Convention of Westminster, these letters suggest clandestine support began much earlier, potentially implicating British intelligence in providing some of Frederick's battlefield information. Archaeological evidence adds yet another dimension to these mysteries. Recent excavations around Lobositz have uncovered evidence of what appear to be pre-battle reconnaissance tunnels, extending from the Elbe riverbank toward Austrian positions, an engineering feat that would have required weeks of advanced preparation and detailed knowledge of where Austrian forces would be positioned. The story of espionage surrounding Lobositz continues into the battle's aftermath. Austrian records indicate an unusually high number of deserters in the weeks following the engagement, potentially Prussian agents extracting themselves after their intelligence mission was complete. Similarly, several Bohemian landowners were arrested by Austrian authorities in November 1756 on charges of providing comfort to the enemy, suggesting Frederick's intelligence network extended deep into local civilian populations. Modern intelligence analysts reviewing these historical documents have noted striking similarities to Cold War espionage techniques, suggesting that many practices considered innovations of modern intelligence work actually have roots in these 18th century operations. Former CIA historical analyst Richard Keller observes, "The Aquila network shows a sophistication in tradecraft, dead drops, cutouts, cipher systems, and financial laundering that we previously associated with much later periods." As historians continue to analyze these documents, the Battle of Lobositz increasingly appears less as a straightforward military engagement and more as the visible manifestation of a complex shadow war fought with quills and whispers as much as with muskets and cannon. The Battle of Lobositz, unlike many 18th century military engagements, benefits from an exceptionally rich collection of primary documentation that allows modern historians to reconstruct the events with remarkable precision. Recent archival discoveries, combined with advanced terrain analysis techniques, have transformed our understanding of this pivotal confrontation. Among the most valuable primary sources is Frederick the Great's personal battle journal, preserved in the Prussian military archives in Berlin. This leather-bound volume, written partly in Frederick's own hand and partly dictated to his military secretary, Heinrich de Cat, provides an hour-by-hour account of the battle from the Prussian perspective. The journal's most revealing entry comes from 7:30 a.m. on October 1st, when Frederick writes, "The fog deceives us completely. What appeared as a small Austrian outpost is revealing itself as something far more substantial. I have perhaps underestimated Browne's capacity to anticipate our movements." The journal contains 14 hand-drawn tactical diagrams showing the evolution of Prussian troop positions throughout the day. Particularly noteworthy is Frederick's sketch of the Lobosch Hill assault, complete with annotations regarding the terrain challenges his troops encountered. He specifically notes, "The vineyard walls create defensive lines we had not properly accounted for. Each terrace must be taken individually, slowing our advance considerably." The Austrian Military Museum in Vienna houses the Lowositz portfolio, a collection of 17 original maps drawn by Austrian military cartographers before, during, and immediately after the battle. These include Browne's Preparatory Survey, September 15th, 20th, 1756, a detailed topographical map of the Lowositz area commissioned by Field Marshal Browne 3 weeks before the battle. This map, drawn at 1/12,000 scale, shows remarkable accuracy in its elevation contours and identifies key terrain features including the vineyard terraces, drainage ditches, and water obstacles. Browne's personal annotations in the margins reveal his thinking about defensive positions, with notes such as, "Artillery position here commands both river approach and northern road, and Lobosch slopes ideal for Grenz's style of fighting." The Homolka Hill Artillery Survey, a specialized map prepared by Major Anton Feuerstein of the Austrian artillery, showing precise firing angles, ranges, and fields of fire from various potential battery positions. The document includes ballistic calculations for different elevations and powder charges, demonstrating the sophisticated mathematics behind 18th century artillery deployment. The post-battle position map, October 2nd, 1756, created the day after the battle by Captain Johann Wenzel. This map documents the final positions of both armies and includes detailed notations about casualties, captured equipment, and terrain alterations caused by the fighting. Particularly valuable are Wenzel's annotations regarding troop movements during the fog, reconstructed from officer interviews conducted immediately after the battle. The French diplomatic archives in Paris contain crucial context in the form of dispatches from the Marquis de Valory, French ambassador to Prussia. His report, dated October 8, 1756, provides a neutral third-party assessment of the battle's outcome. Despite King Frederick's public pronouncements of victory, private conversations with his officers revealed deep concern about the Austrian performance. The king expected to sweep through Bohemia with minimal resistance, but now speaks of needing to reconsider his strategy for the coming year. The Austrians have demonstrated defensive capabilities that were not evident in previous campaigns. A unique civilian document has proven unexpectedly valuable to military historians. The Lobositz Vineyard Survey of 1755, a tax assessment document created just months before the battle, provides extraordinarily detailed information about the vineyard terraces that became a critical battlefield feature. This cadastral survey includes precise measurements of each terrace wall, height, thickness and length, spacing between vine rows, relevant for infantry movement, locations of irrigation systems and drainage ditches, which impacted cavalry operations, construction materials used in different sections, determining which walls provided effective cover from musket fire. Professor Elizabeth Warnick of the University of Heidelberg, who rediscovered this document in 2009, notes, "This tax document has proven more valuable for understanding the battle terrain than many of the military maps. The precision with which it documents these agricultural features gives us unprecedented insight into the exact obstacles facing Prussian troops during their uphill assault." Beyond official military documents, personal letters from participants provide emotional context and ground-level perspectives. Lieutenant Karl Wilhelm von Kleist's letters, a collection of 12 letters written by this Prussian infantry officer to his wife in the weeks surrounding the battle. His October 3rd letter provides a haunting account of the fighting on Lobositz Hill. The vineyard terraces turned the battle into a series of small, vicious fights. Our neat formations became meaningless as we climbed from level to level. On one terrace, I found myself alone with 7 men facing Croatian skirmishers, hiding behind vine supports. The fighting became personal, men grappling with bayonets among the harvest-ready grapes. The sweet smell of crushed fruit mixed with the smoke and blood. I will never drink wine again without remembering this day. Field Marshal Browne's private correspondence with Empress Maria Theresa. These 6 letters, written between September 28th and October 7th, reveal Browne's strategic thinking and his assessment of Frederick's capabilities. In his October 2nd letter, he writes, "Your Majesty, we have achieved what many thought impossible. We have checked Frederick's advance and preserved Bohemia. This was not accomplished through numerical superiority, but through careful selection of terrain and patience. The King of Prussia remains a formidable opponent whose troops display remarkable discipline, but they are not invincible when properly met on ground of our choosing. 21st century technology has revolutionized our understanding of how geography influenced the battle." In 2015, a team from Charles University in Prague conducted a comprehensive geographic information system study of the battlefield, combining light detection and ranging terrain mapping, soil composition analysis, historical weather records, hydrological modeling of 1756 water features, archaeological findings from battlefield excavations. This analysis revealed several critical insights. The fog pocket phenomenon. Computer modeling of air currents and temperature gradients has demonstrated why the fog was so persistent in certain areas of the battlefield. The unique terrain configuration created what meteorologists call a cold air trap in the low ground between Lowositz and Vichnitz, explaining why visibility remained poor there even after clearing elsewhere. Artillery range verification. By combining precise elevation data with ballistic calculations, researchers have confirmed Field Marshal Browne's remarkable accuracy in positioning his artillery. The Austrian batteries on Homolka Hill were placed at the mathematically optimal position to cover approaches while remaining difficult to counter battery. Movement rate analysis. Using energy expenditure algorithms developed for modern military planning, researchers calculated the exact physical demands of the Prussian assault up Lobositz Hill. Infantry soldiers in full equipment climbing the vineyard terraces would have experienced cardiovascular demands, equivalent to running a modern half-marathon, explaining the extreme fatigue factors that influence the battle's later stages. Systematic archaeological investigations conducted between 2010 and 2019 have yielded over 8,000 battle-related artifacts that provide physical confirmation of historical accounts. Musket ball distribution analysis. The pattern of recovered musket balls on Lowositz Hill confirms the terrace-by-terrace fighting described in primary accounts. Concentrations of Austrian ammunition are found behind terrace walls, while Prussian balls are distributed in the open approaches, confirming the tactical advantage provided by these agricultural features. Mass grave excavations. 3 mass graves discovered near the base of Lowositz Hill have provided osteological evidence supporting casualty reports. Analysis of skeletal trauma patterns shows a high percentage of bayonet wounds, confirming accounts of close-quarter fighting among the vineyards. The Prussian time capsule. Perhaps the most remarkable archaeological find is what researchers have dubbed the Prussian time capsule, a completely preserved section of battlefield covered by a landslide in the 1760s and only uncovered during highway construction in 2012. This 40-square-meter section contains undisturbed evidence of the battle exactly as it was left, including the remains of 6 Prussian grenadiers still in formation, a complete field surgeon's kit abandoned during the retreta, an officer's writing case containing half-written orders. Using all these sources, the Czech National Museum has created the most comprehensive digital battlefield reconstruction ever attempted for an 18th century engagement. This interactive model allows researchers to view the battlefield from any position at any time of day, track individual unit movements with timestamps, simulate visibility conditions based on historical weather data, calculate line of sight from any commander's position, model artillery trajectories, and fields of fire. This reconstruction has resolved numerous historical debates about the battle, particularly regarding the critical moment when Frederick realized the full extent of the Austrian deployment and how the lifting fog progressively revealed Browne's defensive preparations. Through this unprecedented combination of 18th century documentation and 21st century analytical techniques, the Battle of Lobositz has become one of the most thoroughly documented engagements of the 7 Years' War, providing invaluable insights into the military thinking, leadership decisions, and battlefield experiences that shaped this pivotal moment in European history. The Battle of Lobositz, fought on October 1, 1756, reverberated far beyond the misty Bohemian plains where it took place, fundamentally altering the trajectory of the 7 Years' War and reshaping the future of European warfare. This single engagement produced consequences that would echo through military academies and diplomatic chambers for generations to come. Frederick the Great's forced retreat to Saxony represented more than a mere tactical setback. It constituted the first significant check to Prussian military ambitions under his leadership. Having entered Bohemia with supreme confidence in his army's superiority, Frederick found himself compelled to abandon his strategic objectives and withdraw northward as winter approached. This retreat carried profound psychological implications, as Captain Heinrich von Kleist recorded in his diary. "The king rides in silence now, his face betraying calculations I have not seen since the darkest days at Mollwitz. The aura of invincibility that had surrounded our forces since Hohenfriedberg has been pierced." For the first time, European courts began to question whether Prussian military dominance might have definable limits. The battle laid bare critical limitations in Frederick's vaunted Prussian military system. His innovative oblique order attack methodology, which had revolutionized battlefield tactics during the War of Austrian Succession, proved less effective against Browne's meticulously prepared defensive positions. The disciplined Prussian infantry, trained to maneuver with mechanical precision on open terrain, struggled to maintain cohesion in the vineyard terraces of Lowositz Hill. Furthermore, the engagement exposed vulnerabilities in Frederick's intelligence gathering and battlefield reconnaissance. His initial misreading of Austrian strength demonstrated that even brilliant commanders could fall victim to operational blind spots. Military theorist Karl von Clausewitz would later cite Lowositz as the first indication that Frederican warfare had identifiable weaknesses that could be exploited by adaptive opponents. Perhaps most significantly, the battle established a new paradigm in European warfare that would influence military thinking for decades. Field Marshal Browne's defensive masterpiece demonstrated how carefully selected terrain, combined with disciplined troops and well-positioned artillery, could neutralize the advantages of even the most aggressive and well-trained attacking force. The Austrian success validated what became known as position warfare, the deliberate selection and preparation of defensible ground that negated an enemy's strengths. General Antoine-Henri Jomini, the influential 19th-century military theorist, would later write, "At Lobositz, we see the seeds of modern defensive doctrine, the integration of terrain, firepower, and maneuver into a unified system that could withstand even Frederick's tactical brilliance." The ripple effects extended beyond military circles into the diplomatic realm. The unexpected Austrian success at Lobositz strengthened the anti-Prussian coalition, encouraging France and Russia to commit more fully to their alliance with Austria. The French Foreign Minister, Duc de Choiseul, specifically referenced the battle in diplomatic correspondence, noting, "The events at Lobositz suggest Prussia is not the unstoppable force many had feared. With coordinated effort among the Allies, Frederick's ambitions might be contained." The battle thus helped solidify the diplomatic realignment that would characterize the 7 Years' War, transforming what might have been a limited regional conflict into the first truly global war. For the Habsburg monarchy, Lowositz represented a critical psychological victory. After decades of military setbacks against Prussia, the Austrian army had finally demonstrated its ability to stand firm against Frederick's best troops. Empress Maria Theresa captured this sentiment in her letter to Field Marshal Browne. "You have given heart to our empire and shown that Austrian arms, when properly led and positioned, need not yield to any force in Europe." This renewed confidence accelerated military reforms already underway, including the standardization of infantry tactics and the reorganization of the artillery arm under Prince Liechtenstein. The tactical innovations displayed at Lobositz influenced military developments across Europe for the next century. The effective use of light infantry by Austrian forces, particularly the Croatian Grenzers, who used the vineyard terraces for cover while engaging the advancing Prussians, demonstrated the value of specialized troops trained in irregular warfare. Within 5 years, most European armies had established dedicated light infantry units modeled partly on those that had performed so effectively at Lobositz. The Prussian military itself underwent significant reforms in response to the battle's lessons, with Frederick establishing his own light infantry formation, the Frey battalions, specifically designed to counter the type of irregular warfare he had encountered on Lobosch Hill. The battle also accelerated developments in artillery tactics and technology. The devastating effectiveness of Austrian guns positioned on Homolka Hill, which disrupted Prussian cavalry movements throughout the engagement, highlighted the increasing importance of artillery as a battle-winning arm rather than merely a supporting element. Field Marshal Browne's innovative use of artillery to shape the battlefield, rather than simply to inflict casualties, influenced generations of artillery theorists, culminating in Napoleon's concept of artillery as the ultimate battle winner, half a century later. Beyond its immediate military impact, Lobositz altered Frederick's own approach to warfare. His post-battle correspondence reveals a more cautious commander, increasingly concerned with reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. In a letter to his brother Prince Henry, dated November 1756, Frederick wrote, "We can no longer afford to advance blindly. Every position must be thoroughly scouted, every hill surveyed, every local questioned. The enemy has learned much, and so must we. This newfound caution would characterize Prussian operations for the remainder of the 7 Years' War, as Frederick increasingly sought to fight only on ground of his choosing. The economic consequences of the battle were equally significant. The Prussian retreat to Saxony meant that Frederick's army would spend the winter consuming Saxon rather than Bohemian resources, a critical factor in the war's economic dimensions. Saxon archives reveal that the winter quartering of Prussian troops cost the already occupied territory an additional 1.7 million thalers in requisitions and forced contributions. Meanwhile, the preservation of Bohemia's resources allowed the Habsburg monarchy to continue financing its military operations without the catastrophic economic disruption that Bohemian occupation would have caused. For military education, Lowositz became a foundational case study in the emerging science of military theory. The battle features prominently in the earliest curricula of formal military academies established in the late 18th century, including the Theresian Military Academy in Wiener Neustadt and the Prussian Kriegsakademie in Berlin. Its lessons in terrain selection, reconnaissance, combined arms operations, and the limitations of even the most disciplined troops in difficult terrain became standard teaching points for officer candidates. The psychological impact on common soldiers also represents an underappreciated aspect of Lowositz's legacy. For Prussian troops, long accustomed to victory under Frederick's leadership, the battle introduced an element of doubt that would affect morale in subsequent engagements. Austrian veteran Anton Hessler captured this sentiment in his memoirs. After Lobositz, we no longer regarded the Prussians with the same dread. They could bleed like any men, and their famous formations could be broken against stone walls and disciplined fire. This subtle shift in psychological advantage would influence countless small unit engagements throughout the remainder of the war. Through these multifaceted impacts, strategic, tactical, diplomatic, economic, educational, and psychological, the Battle of Lobositz transcended its immediate outcome to shape the character of European warfare for generations. What might have been merely another clash of 18th century armies instead became a pivotal moment in military history, demonstrating how a single well-fought engagement could alter the course of a continental conflict and leave an indelible mark on the evolution of warfare itself. The legacy of the Battle of Lobositz extends far beyond its immediate military impact, casting a long shadow that reaches into modern military education and strategic planning. Today, nearly 3 centuries after the clash between Frederick the Great and Field Marshal Browne, the battle continues to provide valuable lessons for military professionals and historians alike. Modern military academies worldwide, from West Point to Sandhurst, regularly include Lowositz in their curriculum as a masterclass in terrain utilization and defensive warfare. The battle particularly resonates in contemporary military thinking about asymmetric warfare and the importance of defensive preparation. At the NATO Defense College in Rome, instructors frequently draw parallels between Browne's use of Croatian light infantry in the vineyard terraces and modern urban warfare tactics. The battle's influence on military doctrine remains surprisingly relevant. The United States Army War College regularly conducts staff rides of the Lowositz battlefield using modern satellite imagery and terrain analysis to understand how Browne's defensive positions would translate to contemporary warfare. Military planners study how the Austrian commander's integration of terrain, troops, and artillery created what modern doctrine calls defense in depth. What makes Lowositz particularly fascinating for modern military theorists is its demonstration of how superior technology and training can be neutralized by proper terrain selection and defensive preparation. This principle continues to influence military planning, especially in NATO's forward defense strategies in Eastern Europe. As one senior NATO commander noted in a recent War College seminar, The lessons of Lowositz remain relevant. Even the most advanced military force can be stalled by well-prepared defensive positions in properly selected terrain. The battle also provides an intriguing platform for historical speculation and wargaming. Military historians and enthusiasts frequently debate alternative outcomes. What if Frederick had waited for better weather conditions? What if his initial cavalry probe had succeeded in turning the Austrian flank? How would European history have unfolded if Prussia had managed to secure Bohemia in 1756? These counterfactual scenarios are not mere academic exercises. Modern military planners use sophisticated computer simulations based on the Battle of Lobositz to test theories about force multiplication, terrain utilization, and the impact of weather on military operations. The United States Military Academy maintains a detailed digital terrain model of the battlefield, allowing cadets to explore various tactical alternatives using modern military units and equipment. The battle's legacy also lives on in unexpected ways. The Lowositz battlefield has become a popular destination for military history tourism, with thousands of visitors annually walking the grounds where Frederick's famous infantry struggled up the vineyard terraces. Local wine producers now market battlefield reserve vintages, grown on the same terraced slopes that proved so crucial to the Austrian defense. Perhaps most significantly, Lowositz provides a valuable case study in the limitations of military power projection. In an era of increasingly sophisticated military technology, the battle reminds planners that basic geographical and meteorological factors can still decisively influence military outcomes. As one prominent military historian recently observed, the fog that confounded Frederick's reconnaissance would be just as problematic for modern thermal imaging systems. Some military challenges are truly timeless. For modern military professionals, the battle raises intriguing questions about the relationship between technology and terrain. How would modern precision-guided munitions have affected the outcome? Would today's reconnaissance capabilities have prevented Frederick's initial misreading of Austrian strength? These questions drive ongoing analysis and debate in professional military education. The battle's legacy extends beyond purely military considerations into the realm of international relations and diplomatic history. Modern diplomatic academics study Lowositz as an example of how a single battle can shift the dynamics of international alliances and coalition warfare. The parallels to contemporary military alliances and collective security arrangements are frequently discussed in foreign policy circles. Want to explore more fascinating details about this pivotal battle? Hit the notification bell now and subscribe to Modern Age Chronicles. Join our growing community of history enthusiasts as we uncover the hidden stories that shaped our world. What do you think about Frederick's tactics at Lowositz? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this video with fellow military history buffs. Together, we're making history come alive. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll explore another incredible moment that changed the course of history forever.